Here we go. Brand new Flyers Daily for the October 23rd, 2025. Flyers Daily presented by Ticketmaster. Make more memories live. Flyers back in action tonight as they go on the road for a whopping one game in a row to go to Ottawa. A very home-heavy schedule this month of October for the Flyers. But tonight they go north of the border to take on the Ottawa Senators. Then they'll be back at Xfinity Mobile Arena coming up on Saturday for matinee hockey at 12:30 against the New York Islanders. But tonight, it is Ottawa. What's Ottawa's record? All right, they come into this game, 7 games played, a record of 2-4-1, 5 points on the season. Really disturbing number for them is -11. They're -11 in goal differential already, and they've lost their last 2. They're without Brady Tkachuk, by the way, but that -11 to be that high a number this early in the season is a concern. If you're a Sens fan, they did win opening night against the Tampa Bay Lightning 5-4, but then they lost 6-2 against the Panthers, 4-1 against Nashville, 8-4. They lost to Buffalo, 8-4. They had a 4-3 shootout win against Seattle. Then against the Islanders, rather, they lost 5-4, and they lost 3-2 in overtime against Edmonton on Tuesday. And it's the Flyers tonight. So Flyers taking on a Sens team that is off to a very stumbling start. And obviously, when you look at that goal differential number and you look at the goals allowed per games played, they've given up the second most goals per game in the NHL at 4.71. That's just too big of a number too early this early into the season. It can't be that way. And who's been giving up all the goals? Well, it's the guy they've paid a lot of money to, Linus Ullmark. He's got a record of 2-3-1 with a 3.8 goals against average and an .854 save percentage. And when their backup goaltenders got in there for just the one game, he had a .731 and had 7 goals allowed. So it seems like right now for the Ottawa Senators, there's no good option at who to put in net. Not that goaltending will fix it, because a lot of times that's a result. When you got that kind of number this early in the season, that's a result of a team that's not playing good team defense at all. There's way too much quality being thrown at your net, and it's a very difficult thing to deal with. As I mentioned, they're without Brady Tkachuk. Leading the way in points with 8 points so far in 7 games is Shane Pinto. 7 of them are goals. None of his scoring coming on the power play. Is it sustainable? Well, he's got a very high shooting percentage. He's shooting good right now at 31.8, so almost 32%. Dylan Cousins off to a good start, 6 points in 7 games with 4 goals, 2 assists. Jake Sanderson, 1 goal, 4 assists, 5 points. And Claude Giroux still putting up points, a goal and 3 assists so far this season, playing over 15 minutes a game. He's got a power play assist as well. So Flyers got a good opportunity here to take care of the team that's not off to a great start, and that seems like they're very loose defensively, and you can get after them. When you look at the Senators and you're giving up that many goals per game, you got to assume that their penalty kill is not very good. Well, that assumption would be correct. They're killing penalties just 57%. Almost half the power plays they're getting scored on. That's I know we're still in small sample size move. That's a mind-boggling number. That's a disturbing number. Their power play is not bad. And you got some guys that can put the puck in the net, even without Tkachuk, 9th in the league, 26%. Flyers come into the game after a couple of power play goals in the last one, and are up to 25th in the NHL at 15.8%. But to me, Ottawa looks like a ripe team, and the Flyers should go in there and take care of business and get the job done. Because we often say it. It's not who you play sometimes. It's when you play them. Ottawa was a good team last year, made the playoffs. But maybe you're catching them at the right time. Maybe you're catching them at the wrong time. Based on that, they need to turn it around and get things moving in the right direction. We'll see what buttons are pushed and how that plays out. But what the Flyers can control is what they show up and do. And that's another talking point of this podcast episode. As we're here early in the season, a season develops talking points. And I remember one of the things that I thought about a lot and talked about a little over the summer was who's going to be the guy that for the fan base that's going to have the noise around them, that is going to have the people out with their spears and their pitchforks to get. I thought there was a good chance that guy could be Owen Tippett because of the contract kicking in, and a guy that has got such high level of skill. It's so obvious when you watch him. Pretty much a career slow starter, and a guy that when he gets hot, he's hot, and when he's not, you notice it. Well, he's off to a good start, so he is, at least for now, really quieted the noise that could potentially be around him. He got 5 goals in 6 games. He's flying up and down the ice. He's doing it in numerous different ways. He's also playing a little bit more physical to gain himself a little bit more space out there. He has that a little bit of a lightning rod effect. In the past couple of years, we've seen guys, when Ristolainen, before kind of the reshaping of Ristolainen under Brad Shaw, was a guy that was criticized heavily because of what he was getting paid, the lack of analytics love towards him, and a litany of reasons. He was kind of looked at by a lot of people as a player that isn't playing hockey at the right generation for the way he plays. In other words, he would have been better had he played in the 80s. It played a different physical style game. Or you had guys like Morgan Frost that we heard about the potential, but it never fully blossomed. And we've gone through that over the years. We've had different guys that become kind of the target of the fan base. There was always one for just about every team in Philadelphia. It's just been that way for a very long time. Some guys, for Giroux in the beginning of his career was beloved. And then later in his career, when he was part of the Flyers teams, basically from 14 until he left, that made the playoffs every other year, but didn't advance, and he didn't have great numbers in the playoffs, became a guy that was heavily criticized as a good player, but one that can't get his team over the hump because he's not that good, or he would fall short, choke in the playoffs. That was the perception, even though early in his career, he was very good in the playoffs. So you always have those guys. You always have storylines going into a season, and then you have the storylines within the season. We have the storylines in the season of third pair on D. The goaltending always is a storyline in Philadelphia. And since the days of Ron Hextall Part 1 and Bernie before him and Pelle Lindbergh, those storylines went on. And the signing of Ilya Bryzgalov, the trading of Sergei Bobrovsky, and down the line. So you always have those stories as well. And I thought last year in particular for the Flyers, there was just a little too much noise for my liking. And I imagine Keith Jones and Danny Briere and Dan Hilferty's liking too. There was just a little too much negative noise around the Flyers. And, you can say, well, those things shouldn't affect the team because they're pros. But there is an effect, because if there's that much negative noise around, there's a lot of uncertainty. And uncertainty in pro sports creates volatility. And volatility creates a team that's probably not going to be successful. So, with the start of Owen Tippett and the 5 goals so far in 6 games this season, or Bobby Brink looking like he took his offseason incredibly serious and took a next step. Now, these are early. You look at the development of the Cates line and Forster. Forster off to a good start, notorious slow starter. Travis Sanheim was a guy that there was, maybe hype's not the right word, but there was, good expectations for Travis Sanheim, young, and they weren't there right away. He's a defenseman. It takes a little longer, and he has fulfilled those expectations. And in my consideration, beyond. And then you see some of, the general manager's decisions in the offseason to find a way to go out and acquire a Trevor Zegras, who's off to a solid start with 5 assists so far in 6 games. And you see those things, and there's just not a lot of things that are noisy around the team. Noah Juleson, who was brought in as a third pairing D, has kind of just done his job. I don't think there's been anything wrong with Juleson so far. Again, small sample size and a rotational cast of partners. Is there noise around Emil Andre being sent back down? Not really. He's not, because he doesn't have to clear waivers, and he can be pulled back up. And the Flyers have said he's basically like the next man up, even though he's not with the big club. And so, JB Drysdale, there's some expectations there of his development because of what you gave up for him in Cutter Gauthier and how much hype there was around that player. So you kind of got a team right now that through the summer, the drafting of Martone, maybe Nesbitt caused a little noise, but into the second round of Van Sage and on down the line is a team that's kind of really brought the level of noise down. Even going back to the Scott Lawton trade to get it, to hold out, get a first round pick from Toronto, and Grabenkin also has brought some noise down. The performance and growth of a guy like Alex Bump, even though he didn't make the team this year out of camp, he looks like a promising player for the future. So it's a lot less noisy with things around. Now, noise in the pretty recent past has really been kind of at the ire or venom of Flyers Nation, especially online, where it can get a little irrational or crazy at times. And I think it has already a little bit this year because Matvei Mishkov is a lightning rod online. He has not gotten off to a great statistical start to this season. Frankly, he hasn't gotten off to a good start. We can see it. The eye test tells you. He hasn't had his legs. For whatever reason that is, he just hasn't had his legs. Some people say, doesn't matter, you're a rebuilding team, you play them through it, which I disagree with. I don't think you put a player when they don't have their legs out in a position to further not have success. I think you get him in shape and then build that up. But there's different, everybody's got different opinions on how the Flyers should move forward. What I know is this: I'm not worried about him at all. He's going to be great. He's going to be fine. He's got a goal and an assist in 6 games. I think sometimes the expectations may be a little lofty, a little too soon for him. I think it's going to take a little time, like it did with Nikita Kucherov. If you look at his number in his first 3 years in the NHL. But other than that, usage, there was a lot of consternation over the summer about dump and chase, which I kind of punched back on a little bit because people look at the dunk and chase and go, well, dump and chase, that's like 70s and 80s hockey. If Rick Tocchet's going to want to play dump and chase, like we're just going back to the old Broad Street Bully days, which isn't the case. The team that dumped the puck the most last year was the Florida Panthers. They are a great dump and chase team. Then you look at a team like Carolina, very successful, or Edmonton, who doesn't dump a lot. They're more possession carry teams, but you have to look at your personnel. But Florida is a team that dumps the puck a ton. That's why they check a ton. We looked at the numbers last week of teams that hit the most in the NHL and that what that portends to when it comes to the playoffs. 8 of the top 10 teams at lowest in hits per game last year made the playoffs. Hitting, being a team that out hits the opponent, it is generally the result for the most part. Doesn't mean that you're going to the playoffs. It means you're not. Today's NHL, you don't make hits when you have the puck. So in recent years, I went back and just kind of thought about this and go, okay, what brings negative noise? What are kind of the, what's the chemistry of negative noise around the Flyers? And why isn't it there this year so far? There's a little bit. There always will be. But I wanted to come up with some specific examples of negative noise in recent years, in the Twitter generation. The first one that I thought of was Andrew McDonald. And he checks all the boxes of negative noise. And this is why. He was acquired in trade with the New York Islanders and then signed to an extension with the Flyers. So he falls into the massive overpay of a contract relevant to his skill level and market value. His last NHL contract with the Flyers was a 6-year, $30 million deal, which was bought out in 2019 and his career ended. That gets the ire of the online community and the fan base. And deservedly so. It was an overpayment to a player that the market didn't support, not to mention the term. And to maybe, I think some people would look at it to justify the trade. So that's one example of the chemistry of negative noise and how it's bred. Next one, the coach's darling that we clearly know doesn't belong. We've seen this over the years. Sometimes you see a coach and he just keeps forcing a player out there on the ice and you're going, why is this guy getting so much ice time? Why is he getting this chance here? What is going on? I don't understand. And it happens for a period of time and it just leaves you scratching your head because it's like, how can this coach not see the obvious? And why is that? Well, for the Flyers, that was in between the years of 2013, 14, and 2017, when Dave Haxtell was the coach, who was also the coach at North Dakota, where Chris Vandevelde played his college hockey. Chris Vandevelde ended up playing in the NHL 278 games over 7 seasons. He was in Edmonton for 3 years, but he only played 28 games in Edmonton when he was 23, 24, and 25 years old. He came to Philadelphia, and in those 4 years, he played in 278 games. He had 18 goals, 30 assists, 48 points in those 278 games. So that is another, to me, great example of fulfilling the boxes that beget negative noise. All right, what is another one? Well, how about seeking a solution to one of your problems, or something you need as a team, with the right player, a good player, but at the wrong time in his career? Now, the Flyers have a litany of guys. We could build a team of right player, wrong time, whether that's Tony Amonte, whether that's just Daryl Sittler, or whether that's, there's tons of guys that we can go back. Paul Coffey, because we look how great Amonte was, or Coffey and Daryl Sittler, but that's not what they were when the Flyers obtained them. More recently, we can look at that, and we can look at a guy like Valtteri Filppula, who had a great NHL career, played over 1,000 games, 1,056 games in the league, had 530 points. Real good. Averaged a half a point per game as a player in his over 1,000 game career. Was here in Philadelphia, played 101 games, had 41 points, and he just wasn't near the same player that he was way earlier in his career. Now, he didn't get here until he was 32. So that's understandable. But sometimes when the front office seeks that solution, thinking that player can be maybe what he was 3 years earlier, that gets the ire of the fan base. Next one is the player that you get in return for trading a liked or solid player from here. Now, there's this huge example which fits but doesn't fit. It's the big one where you trade Richards and Carter to the Kings and to Columbus. Carter eventually makes his way to LA as well. They win a couple of cups. In return, you end up getting Schenn, Simmons, Voracek, and the pick to be able to grab Sean Couturier. But it's what happens after that that meets the requirements of the fans' venom. It's the trade of Braden Schenn to the St. Louis Blues for Jori Lehtera and a 2017 first rounder and a conditional first rounder, which turned into Morgan Frost and Joel Farabee. Jori Lehtera, it was so over for Jori Lehtera when he was here. Came here at age 30, and as a Flyer, he played in 89 games, had 4 goals, 7 assists, 11 points, couldn't move on the ice. He was a guy that triggered the fan base. I get why. And you give up Braden Schenn, who turned into a great leader. Was a great leader and was here. Was a good player, was still developing. And that's what you got. And then Morgan Frost development as a Flyer was so staggered and just never fulfilled, which eventually had them move him last year to Calgary. And same with Farabee, that it's one of those ones that's kind of was like you ate something and it left a bad taste in your mouth and you can't get it out. So that one certainly fits the equation as well. The next one is the career perceptive underperformance based on hype, name, and then the money they got. And for the Flyers, there's a recent example, and that's Kevin Hayes, who signed in the offseason after the 2018-19 season, heading into the 2019-20 season, signed a contract with the Flyers for 7 years and $50 million. Based on, Kevin Hayes was never a guy that had big numbers. You look the year prior to signing with the Flyers, he only played in 51 games that year in 18-19 and had 42 points, but only 14 goals, 19 goals the year before that. People looked at it, and he was traded to Winnipeg too at the deadline that year, and only had 5 goals, 8 assists, 13 points in 20 games there. But then he comes into the Flyers with the 7 times 50 contract. Couple that with Nolan Patrick comes in and is not ready to go and can't play in camp, and you're kind of left shaking your head. Now, that first year Kevin Hayes was a Flyer, they played 69 games this year. He played in all of them because the season was shortened due to the pandemic, and he was fantastic. He came in, he had 23 goals, 18 assists, 41 points in 69 games. He was phenomenal on the penalty kill. He had a big personality, but then naturally things dropped off. The next year, just 12 goals in the 55-game shortened season, 10 goals in 48, 18, and then eventually moved on to St. Louis, Pittsburgh, and played 4 years as a Flyer. But the 7 times 50 for a guy that never had huge numbers was one of those ones that put a target on his back. What also can garner you a target? How about being the wrong pick at the wrong time, especially obviously in the first round, and especially high in the first round. Nolan Patrick at number 2 overall in the 2017 NHL draft. This one is tough because for most of that year, Nolan Patrick was the consensus number 1 overall pick. Things changed around late February or March when Patrick got hurt with the Brandon Wheat Kings and didn't have, obviously, the strong finish, and Nico Hischier did. Combine that with what was taken after Nolan Patrick, and our remembrances of it sometimes become revisionist history, that you really gets the ire of the fan base and becomes a negative talking point. And his presence was. You look at Nolan Patrick as the second overall pick, and his personality did him no favors. He looked disinterested. When he spoke publicly, he seemed disinterested, didn't have much of a personality, and didn't put up much in numbers in his short time here either. He came in at 19 years old. I thought he should have been more prepared for the NHL considering his bloodlines. He wasn't. He played in 73 games. He had 13 goals, 17 assists, 30 points, which is fine for a rookie. In his second year, he played in 72 games. He had 13 goals, 18 assists, and 31 points. Minor growth. Then, obviously, he had the head issues, which that's not his fault. And then he played 52 more games for the Flyers with 4 goals, 5 assists, 9 points. Tried to make a comeback with Vegas and played 25 games, only 2 goals, 5 assists, and 7 points. Career over. Nico Hischier still kicking around playing in the NHL. Obviously, the captain of the New Jersey Devils, played in 533 games. Flyers couldn't pick him. He was picked ahead of them. They were going to take, if the Devils took Nolan Patrick, they were taking Nico Hischier. If the Devils took Nico Hischier, the Flyers were taking Nolan Patrick. It's the way it worked out. But the problem is that in that draft, and you look at it and you go, well, who was taken just after Nolan Patrick? That they should have known that maybe there would have been head issues, or that he wasn't the right temperament, or he wasn't the right player. Miro Heiskanen was taken by the Dallas Stars number 3 overall. Top level defenseman. 481 games. Really good player. Who was taken after that? Well, the next Bobby Orr was taken after that. And Cale Makar. 402 NHL games. He's got 436 points as a blue liner. Now, Makar, if the Flyers would have taken Makar at that draft, at that time, people would have gone bananas. He wasn't thought of like that. But sometimes there's guys that play in lower leagues that when they're drafted, all of a sudden, it's perfect, and it was for Makar. Elias Pettersson was then taken 5th overall, which doesn't look as egregious now, but still is egregious. And look, there were some picks in that draft that haven't worked out great. Cody Glass was taken 6th by Vegas. Casey Middlestat was taken 8th by Buffalo. Remember, he couldn't do a pull-up at the combine. And then you see other guys like Owen Tippett was taken in that draft. 10th overall by the Florida Panthers. They just never had room to bring him up, so he became part of the Claude Giroux trade. And the reason we're having this conversation. But also in that draft, you had Nick Suzuki taken 13. Martin Necas taken 12th. You had other guys. You look even further down. Now, these guys wouldn't have been considered for top 2. Jake Ottinger was taken 26th overall in that draft. That's also the year the Flyers drafted Morgan Frost. So the pick of Nolan Patrick combined with what you didn't get or could have got is also something that creates a lot of negative noise, and rightfully so. And really, to me, that mistake in 2017, as it turns out, is something that has had legs and has hurt the team. When you get luck to move up to number 2 overall, and it turns out to be a great big swing and a miss, and you missed out on Heiskanen, Pettersson, and most especially Cale Makar, it's going to hurt a franchise. To me, I'm not blaming it on where the Flyers have been the last couple of years and why this rebuild was a necessity on one single thing. It's a lot of things, but that's a big piece of it. That mistake at the 2017 draft is a really, really big piece of it. So why not much negative noise around the Flyers right now? I like it that way. It's more about hockey. I'm about hockey. We'll see if it continues. There's some control in that the players have too, by playing well, doing the right things, being professional, playing hard. We know they're going to play hard under Rick Tocchet, because if you don't, you're not going to play. Is there going to be drama at times with Mishkov's ice time and usage or other things? Absolutely. Nothing wrong with that. That's sports. That's why it creates conversation. It's the ultimate soap opera. You never know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen. You never know what you're going to see, when you're going to see it. So those things are great. But too much negative noise is not a good thing. Flyers did a good job of bringing that temperature down. And we go through those recent negative noise chemistry equations of the past decade or so, and they're pretty noisy. And they became big-time online debates and targets for online negative noise. No other way to put it. All right, everybody. Flyers Sens tonight. We'll break it down tomorrow. Join us then on a brand new Flyers Daily.